I love people watching year-round, but there's something about this time of year, specifically those Santa photo op lines where you get to go and meet him and get a picture with him, that just kicks it up a notch. Because there's incredible variety in those lines. You have people that are there with the freshest clothes and the haircuts that just got done, and they are picture perfect for this photo op. And right behind them in line are people that are half-dressed, some in pajamas, some in not. They just got pulled out of the car because they saw Santa and they just ran over to him. No preparation, no forethought at all, just taking advantage of the opportunity. In this line, you have kids who are scared, wondering, who in the world is this guy that they want me to come and sit in his lap? This is stranger danger. On the other side of them, you have kids who are bursting with excitement. They cannot wait to go up and meet this guy that they have been writing letters to all month long. Some people come with those lists of demands like a hostage negotiator. You've got to give me these things. The G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, it's got to be there, or next year, just look at it with the damage I'm going to do. Other people come just with complete gratitude, just happy to receive anything, even the candy cane that they give out at the end of the line. People watching the Santa line is a lot like people watching individuals approach Christ at Christmas time for pastors like me. There's just lots of similarities. There's people that have been preparing for this moment all year, getting themselves ready for the coming of Christ. And then there's others that just thought about it long enough to show up at a service or buy a gift or put a little sticker that says "Keep Christ in Christmas" on the back of one of the presents they wrote. There's people that are excited because they get to spend so much time with him at this time of year, between the extra services and the Bible readings and the devotionals and the music. It's just what they are longing for. And then there's others that are scared because they're like, who is this guy? They don't know him yet. They haven't really spent time with him. They're not sure if they want to, and yet they can't seem to get away from him in this moment. There are people who become grateful for every little gift that they've been given this year. And then there's others that just have this list of demands. And a lot of times what's funny about the list of demands is not even so much a list of things they need or want as it is that they have got life figured out. They have all the answers for their lives and everybody else's life. And they want Jesus, the Christ, to get in line with what they're thinking. To come on and get on board their train and help him help drive that train to the glorious future that they have prepared for themselves. So which one are you this Christmas? One of those? Something else entirely? But even more importantly, as we are on this side of Christmas and looking at a new year, are you who you want to be when it comes to approaching Christ? Because not every approach to Christ gets you across the threshold into his presence. At least not the fullness of his presence. There was a ruler at the time that he was born named King Herod. Herod, as the ruler, had this mindset that everything he did was right. Whatever he wanted was the right thing. He was in charge, and so that's all that really mattered. Like some of our parents did growing up, whenever anyone asked him why, he just said, because I said so. And that was enough. Whether it was to tax somebody, whether it was to eat this for dinner, whether it was to have executions or pardons, because I said so was all that he needed to have it made right. And he, because he had the power and the position and the money and the authority, could make it happen. And for Herod, he was the center of his story. Everything revolved around him. Everything centered on him. And there was something about that just cut off his imagination. He couldn't imagine anything possible beyond him being the center of the story. And suddenly he's approached by wise men from the east, who we'll talk about in a second. And they told him about the coming of this new king, the Christ. Someone who was promised to the people of Israel, who would bring forgiveness and new life and would bring about peace that no one had seen before. And Herod, instead of welcoming that promise that was given to him to give him hope, saw that as a threat. Because who would fear him if new life was available? Who would worship him if someone could offer forgiveness? Who would follow him if there was a new kingdom that actually brought peace? And so he used all of his might. He used all of his pride. He used everything at his disposal to try and find this child, to get into the presence of Christ. And he never was able to do it. Those wise men that came to him, though, we know them as the Magi. They also were rulers where they came from. They also were wealthy. In fact, they were even a step removed in that they were foreigners with other culture and other religions than what the promised Messiah was supposedly sent for. And they too, like Herod, sought for the child with all of their might. In fact, they were willing to travel months at expense to come and find where he was going to be. And they had been looking for him in the first place. And they were able to meet the child that they had longed for. Why did they get across the threshold instead of Herod? If you go to Bethlehem today, there's a church there called the Church of the Nativity. It is the oldest continuously used church in the Middle East. And the door to enter it is kind of hard to find because it's been shrunk down. Now, at one point it was shrunk because they wanted to stop raiders from being able to ride their horses in to the church and, do whatever they wanted to do to it. But they've made it smaller even than that over the years because they wanted visitors to have to bend down to enter. The entrance to this church where Jesus was born, where Christ came to earth, is called the door of humility. The reason that the Magi were able to get across the threshold into the full presence of Christ was because they were willing to humble themselves and to bend down to cross the entrance, to get across the threshold to see Christ. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. And on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. And then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. The Magi were willing to bend their knees, even though they were rulers, even though they were kings in their own right, even though they had all kinds of power and authority. They came to this humble little home to a helpless child, and they were willing to bow down and realize that they were not the center of the story. He was. That they were not to call all the shots. He was. That they were to become less so that he could become greater. And it wasn't something that they were upset about. In fact, they were overjoyed at the opportunity to be able to do this, and they were so filled with gratitude that they were willing to give gifts sacrificially to show that. Gifts of their time, We're not sure exactly how long it took, but probably at least a year away from their family to be able to have this moment. But also things that cost them of gold, of frankincense, of myrrh, gifts that declared that the one that they were giving the gift to was royalty and worthy to be worshipped. And if we, as we start a new year, are to come into the presence of Christ in this kind of way that overjoys us and fills us to the point where we are willing to express gratitude and sacrifice with our lives, if we want things to be transformed, if we want the expectations to not just be met, to be exceeded, we have to enter the same way. We can't enter thinking we are the center of the story. We can't enter thinking that we have got it all figured out. We just want to add Jesus to us. We have to enter humbly. Which sometimes is hard because life is so busy for us now. And we have convinced ourselves if we ever stop, if we ever take a break, that everything will collapse. In other words, it all depends on me. And sometimes we need a reminder that we are not God. We need to bow down to see Him. And when we're humble, we realize the blessings we've been given, and we're grateful for them. The Magi weren't giving gifts out of a sense of trying to earn something. They had realized what they had been given and being able to be in the presence of Christ. And they couldn't help but offer something back in return. Alice Walker says, "Thank you is the best prayer that anyone could say." I say that one a lot. Thank you expresses extreme gratitude, humility, and understanding. Maybe a thank you and an understanding that you and I are not God, but the God who does exist has blessed us in incredible ways, even allowing us to enter into His presence. It should bring us down a little bit and humble us before Him. And then to realize that the greatest gift isn't just that we get to humble ourselves to be in the presence of Christ. It's that Jesus has stooped down and humbled Himself to meet us, to invite us into His presence. It says that Christ left, think about this, Christ left the glories of heaven, where the angels are worshiping Him, where the saints are declaring praises, where all is as it's supposed to be. And He sees us and is mindful of us in our humble estate and is willing to come. And not just come to anywhere, but to come to have a messy birth in a place where the animals are kept, to a family of nobodies, so that any of us might be able to humble ourselves and find Him. Paul described it this way. Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made Himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, and being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, He humbled Himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. The beauty of the lowly manger birth is that Jesus has made Himself accessible to all of us. But to cross the threshold into His presence takes humble gratitude. It's our attitude, more than our positions, more than our abilities, more than what we have to offer. Realizing that Christ is God and that he has stooped to reach me first. Am I willing to accept that gift from him? Lord, I pray that you would help us to humbly enter your presence as we reflect on this year coming ahead. That if we truly desire for you to come and be who you are, which is the center of the story, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the one who has raised the dead, who has risen from the dead, and invites us to find new life and wholeness in you. If that is truly who we want to have come and be in our lives, then may we humble ourselves before you. May we realize that you are God, not us, that you have the answers that we do not, and we are willing to follow where you'll lead us. And we're willing because we know what you have given for us to say thank you. With words, with gifts, but with our lives. And we would take what you have already blessed us with and use it in ways that show how grateful we are. And for some of us, this means that for the first time we get to say yes to your invitation to come and be with you. And if that's us today, Lord, I pray that they would pray with me something like this. God, thank you for sending your Son to me, that I might have access to God. Forgive me for all of the things I have said and done and thought that have turned me away from you, where I thought I could do your job better, or where I thought my ways were always the ways that were right. Thank you for the sacrifice you made that I might have new life, that I might be made right with you, and that I would be adopted into your family with access to all of what that means. Now help me to lean in closer and closer to you, that I might experience the fullness of your presence, not just at Christmas or at New Year's, but each and every moment of my life. We pray this in your name. Amen.